Hey, y'all, happy Monday and welcome to another episode of Tech Backstage. We are live today with Shannon Beck, co-founder and board member at Vooks. Shannon, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I just, coming off a long weekend of, I said that right, Beck's, right?
Bex,
Uh,
yep,
yeah, got it.
BEX.
Cool. Yeah, just coming off a long weekend of just eating with the family 3 days straight. We're just everybody in my family is like a professional foodie, so anytime we go out,
Oh,
it's like you gain 6 pounds over the weekend. So
that's good for your soul, though,
it's super good for your soul. But I also got to go for a run this afternoon. So
Good for your
start.
discipline, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
good.
exactly. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Excited to talk about the topic today. Like we were talking about backstage, a lot of what we're talking about nowadays is focused on the now, but now we're starting to get a little bit more into the hypothetical, the theoretical for the future. So, before we dive into the metaverse today, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them a little bit about yourself, where you're from,
Sure.
and how you ended up at Vooks.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've kind of an interesting journey background, but started in the music industry. I was actually a multi-platinum touring and recording artist for about 10, 15 years. And during that journey, I definitely paid attention to a lot of their rights and agreements and negotiations and just the business side of things. And I firsthand saw physical album sales going away and streaming kicking into high gear. So when the opportunity came to I was a co-founder, co-find
Yeah.
Vooks.
Yeah, right.
Co-finder, how does that work? Actually, my brother and another gentleman named Russell Hertzel and I founded Vooks, and it's a streaming platform for children's storybooks. So I have handled all the negotiations with publishers and rights holders, bringing their physical books into the streaming world. So very parallel kind of experience, though of course different. And that's been something for the last 3 years I've been doing and thoroughly been enjoying it. And yeah, it's just interesting how life can shift in the journey.
Yeah, it
Well,
is too. Yeah, I started out of the music industry as well. I was not a I didn't win any awards or go multi-platinum or anything.
yet,
I
yet.
played bass in a band
That's
that toured around the country in a van, and then
okay.
somebody decided that I was a better audio engineer than a bass player. But
Cool.
that segued into being a software engineer and now
Hey,
a entrepreneur. So,
I think sometimes we gotta like be flexible enough when life opens a path or a journey that we maybe didn't anticipate,
yeah,
or and if you didn't, look at you don't even know where you'd be right now. So like it's really
right.
great that you shifted and evolved.
Yeah. Well, what's funny too is like I feel like the music industry, there's so many different problems that you have to solve from a creative level. Like you're talking about publishing and stuff right now. That's a heavy topic to dive into if you're not aware of how it actually works. And
Yes.
but the kind of the same thing for me is, being on tours and especially like international tours, like no is not an answer when somebody asks you a question. Like if you got to get gear from New York to London and somebody's like it's going to be there a week late, and like the answer is not no, it's no. How much do I have to pay to get it there on time, or what are the other options that we have?
It's
And
true.
so the music industry is great because it teaches you all of these like soft skills, but also probably hard skills that you need in other
Mhm.
industries. And so I
Mhm.
found it actually worked really well for me transitioning to be a software engineer. I'm sure you found it, as a co-founder and now board member at Books.
Mhm.
There's so many things that you have to solve for,
Yep.
and there's no documentation on how to be a successful artist, or there's no successful artist for dummies book or anything like that.
No,
So
there's no proven roadmap and everyone's journey is different, and
yeah,
that's just not even on the talent side, just the journey side. It is
yeah.
so different no matter what path you take. So, learning everything you can, knowing it'll serve you one day. It's not all the fun and
Yeah.
glamour that you put out there. There's a lot of behind the scenes. You're right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's well, and it's also, like you said, it's not all glitz and glamour, and it's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of things that go into it that to actually even be successful at it. So, anyways, we could probably go on that for a little
You
bit,
probably
but
could.
yeah. All right. let's talk about the metaverse, and
Yeah,
let's talk about customer retention. Talking a little bit about the future of creator-driven tech companies.
absolutely. You know, I
So
think it's
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I
No,
was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say, I think it's a very can be a very intimidating topic. It is so new for so many people, and I think my goal here is just to, like, plant that seed for, co-founders or for marketing teams just to really explore what this could look like. And if you don't shift with your consumer behavior, you're going to miss out, and it's going to take you a long time to catch up, or you might not ever. So if anything, it's encouraging to learn more, and you might not shift now, your company might not be ready for it now, but dream now, think about it
Right.
now, because chances are it's just right around the corner.
Yeah, and I mean it's right around the corner. I mean, it's literally in my office. I have my Quest 2 over here because I'm on the same page as you. I'm like, it's coming, and I
Yes.
want to make sure that I'm in front of the wave, not underneath it. But
Absolutely.
um, I think also it's important to understand too when we're talking about the metaverse, it's this. I think for a lot of people right now, it's this kind of untouchable. It's this intangible thing,
Mhm.
but it exists and it's coming together, and the the way it's going to actually take form and kind of land a little bit is through the innovators, through the people. It's like I know a lot of people are talking about Meta, who's actually working on the metaverse, but it's going to be made up of so many different other parts right now, or I
Absolutely.
mean in the future. And what's actually going to turn it into a more tangible thing, and actually kind of a more tangible place, I think, is all of the different innovators and companies coming on board, understanding how to use it in their company, understanding how to reach customers,
Mhm.
understanding how that affects people. Like think about the pandemic, for example. Is
Mm.
that we already saw people starting, especially in the music industry, for example, we already saw concerts starting to go into the metaverse.
Yep.
We already saw, digital meetups starting to happen in the metaverse. So like you said, it's coming. In my opinion, it's we've already seen some examples of it, but I
Mhm.
think when it's going to really start to take form is when people start to see objective value from it. Same thing with,
Mhm.
like, Web3 for me is I always talk about NFTs. We're in this kind of like fun phase right now, but one of these days, people are going to start using it for event tickets
Yeah.
and other things that we haven't even thought of. And that's when it's
Mhm.
actually going to land because it's going to have um, practical value in the world,
Yes. Yes.
right?
And my goal is that companies don't wait till that practical value is so obvious, that
Right.
start now and see what does that look like. And it's a head shift because it is not so tangible. It seems like make believe, but it's really not. And when you think about your future consumers, not just your current audience now, it's who are you going to try to get in front of your product in 20 years?
Hmm.
What are they doing now? What is their behavior now? What are the 12-year-olds doing? How are they maneuvering? And it makes sense to them, even if it's new to you. So try to get in their headspace so you know how it's going to evolve in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So you're not trying to figure it out when it hits.
Right. I love the example that you were talking about backstage about Vooks and your guys' business model because, for people like you and me, it's like we grew up and there was books there,
Yeah.
but a lot of, the today's generation, what was the term that you used, is they're digital consumers first.
Yeah.
And so I love the way that Vooks is looking at it as like, hey, we need to find a way to kind of bridge the gap between where these digital consumers are and where books are coming from. So you're bridging this gap. But I thought that was a really good example, not necessarily of directly going into the metaverse per se, but I thought it was a really good example of the way that companies should approach how they're looking at the metaverse, right?
Mhm.
Look
Mhm.
at, hey, this is where our consumers are at, and this is how we need to be able to meet them there. Because people are moving over there, yes or yes. And people are spending more time in VR and AR. So you have to find a way to make an impact in the metaverse with your customers, right?
Yes,
uh
absolutely. And to kind of elaborate that, yes, we're not a book publisher, but our goal is to make lifelong readers with
mhm.
books. And we are a streaming platform for children's storybooks. And yes, the parents are helping making the decisions now, but because we're able to get books in front of these young digital natives, they're actually wanting the physical book. They go into libraries and they get excited when they see the book that was on Vooks. And that alone plants the seed to when they're 20, 30 years old making their own decisions and they remember the love of books. And even if it was
Mhm.
introduced to them in a different way, it's not the end point. That's not the wrong way. It's just how they communicate, it's how they digest. And so just finding those little nuances of how to get into your consumer or the future consumer that you want, and how can you start to kind of shift so that you don't miss out. Because it's definitely changing. I was hearing a story. I can't remember where it was. It was a podcast about kind of how 12-year-olds are really they're running, what the metaverse is going to look like. So you
Right.
can really find out their behavior. And with Roblox and having like the different clothes and like Gucci's making shoes, and there was a child who was having a birthday party in Roblox, and he was so concerned over what he was going to wear in Roblox. Not
Right.
like the mother was like, he's not even concerned what he wears in real life.
Right.
It is just in this space. And that's kind of it's funny for us because I'm like, really? I can't comprehend that. But that alone is a consumer behavior. That alone shows you what is important to them and makes me think about player one.
Right.
It's this whole paradigm shift.
Yeah, no, and what's funny about it too is that again, like we grew up in a time like we didn't even have cell phones or internet. I mean, I remember my parents literally gave us AOL as a gift at Christmas. You know
It's
what I mean? Like,
amazing.
it's
Yeah,
like
you had to
that's
download it, like the little
yeah, yeah. Like came in the card with the
yeah.
thing, and you had to go download it, and then like yeah. But kids nowadays, they just that's just a thing. It just comes with the territory, right? But I think what you just highlighted right there is I think it's important because what what our reality is and the way that we perceive importance, it's different for somebody else, right? And if you are like you're talking about 12-year-olds, if they're spending the majority of their time in the metaverse,
Mhm,
personal image is an important thing.
mhm,
It's how we identify with people that have like similarities. It's how we identify, people from a distance that we can relate with.
mhm,
You know what I mean? It's how I can tell, like my wife hates this, but I wear Vans and
mhm.
like I look like I'm from the West Coast because I'm from the West Coast, right? But that's how it's easy to identify, like you know,
Mm,
similar people. And you're talking about this kid worried about what he's going to wear in the metaverse.
mhm,
That's important because that's how he perceives himself as an individual. Like,
right.
and to think about the fact that, a digital world can have such an effect, on self-esteem and at a psychological level.
Mhm,
I think that by itself right there goes to show just how important it is because to that kid, that party and what he wears to that party, that's a real thing.
mhm.
And if he can't get the clothes that he's looking for, or if he can't get the image that he's looking for, like, that can cause issues, right? So
Mhm,
I think that goes to show just how important the customer experience is, the user experience is going to be in the metaverse. And
mhm.
um anyways, I think that by itself right there just goes to show the importance, right?
Absolutely, and even as a company looking at, you know, cookies are not gonna be what it was, not what we're
Yeah.
used to. SEO searches are not gonna be what we're used to. It's that type of data points inside the metaverse that is what you're going to need to understand to then serve that customer. So the way you get information, the way you retain the information, the way you digest it in order to serve that customer is a different head shift as well.
That's a great point because you're right. I think Google's committed to cookies going away by like what 2023 of next year, something like that.
Mm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm,
So yeah, so I think we're kind of going back to well, at least the wild west of advertising, and I'm sure they'll come up with something else. But you're right. Like we're coming back to having to sit down and understand user behavior at a more primitive level, and you're not just going to have those pixels that you can plug into somebody's browser. And so yeah, it's going to boil down to user experience. It's going to boil down to um, is somebody who who comes to the metaverse to use your product, are they getting what they're looking for? I really love the example of Gucci that you gave, because I'm thinking about this in a couple different ways, right? So we're thinking about the kid that's looking for a digital outfit, right?
Sure.
But also think about, you know, me or my wife or you, busy professionals. Maybe we don't have the time to go shopping,
Hmm.
and maybe we want to actually be able to just sit down in, you know, our office, be able to go into a Gucci store. I mean, and actually be able to try on some outfits,
Yeah.
come up with something that looks good, you
Hmm.
know. And if you think about it, if you have a realistic avatar, you could potentially go in, try on true size outfits in the
Hmm.
metaverse,
Hmm.
understand what your sizing is, be able to buy it right there in the metaverse, and
Hmm.
have them ship it to you without you even leaving your house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
So when you think about customer retention, that to me is a very tangible thing, as, somebody who doesn't necessarily have a lot of time to go out and go
hmm.
shopping.
Hmm.
So now all of a sudden you're talking about practical uses. You're talking about something that somebody can plug into and actually accomplish something.
Hmm.
And if it's done well, and I think this is the really important part, like this is where the customer retention piece comes in. If it's done well, they're going to keep coming back.
Hmm.
But if you do a bad job, if it's executed poorly,
Yes.
that's where you're going to start losing customer retention.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
I think that full holistic understanding of the customer will help with the retention. If you
Yes.
think you got that, so then that comes into the whole currency side of it, because the
Yeah.
metaverse can have its own system. So then, if yeah, you're prepared to have a great virtual avatar come in and shop, but you're not prepared for the currency side of it or what that exchange looks like, then you've missed the opportunity on a bigger picture. So
Yeah.
really understanding all aspects, because metaverse isn't one technology, isn't one device,
Yeah.
it's a combination.
And that's a great point. And so how do you think, just like I know that this is all like theoretical at this point, but how do you think that, kind of weaving together all of these different experiences, potentially all of these different currencies, all of these different experiences, how do you think that's going to work? Like, what do you like? Do you have any sort of like idea, or are you guys doing anything at Vooks right now to think about, how to weave your experience into the overall fabric of the metaverse? Or are you like, is this just like super early stages?
It's still pretty early stages. There's definitely been conversations around different type of currencies, or taking, IP that we own and creating NFTs. Like, how do we interact just at the level that, the first step. It's definitely, that's why I'm encouraging everyone else to explore, because there's, the sky is the limit, and we're definitely looking around the corner and seeing what that could be. As I was mentioning earlier, teachers utilize the books a lot, and keeping a pulse on what is happening in the education space, or how teachers are going to start using virtual reality in the classrooms, and how can we implement things that'll be more like a puzzle piece, that we don't necessarily have to create the wheel or the answer, but if we can plug ourselves in as a supportive supplemental puzzle piece into their usage, then that's a win. That's a step forward.
Yeah. I love the piece about the classrooms too, because I think that's another huge space, just like we were talking about the pandemic earlier, everybody was on Zoom, but if
Mhm.
you actually are able to create, a virtual 3D classroom, like I was playing around with Facebook Horizons, I think it's called Horizons, like the workspaces where you can actually go in and draw on the
Mhm.
whiteboard. And but if you actually have those types of experiences that are immersive enough that, people actually feel like, again, like there's so many different things you could do in a classroom physically, but if
Mhm.
you can actually recreate some of those experiences digitally, that's where it kind of like sticks together, right? Like one of the things that I did when I first got the Quest 2 is it takes you through the onboarding, and like you get to like throw things and like control like a blimp, and but it feels tangible, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
then like the other thing is, like, I can just go in and I can plug in and play like 18 holes of golf right here in front of my desk.
Right.
And it's like you're like, oh yeah, this is something, right? But
Mhm.
it's something that you want to come back to, right? You're
Yes.
creating something that and I think a lot of modern day apps do this, but it's something where you're kind of giving the user, it's like what's that, the dieting app Noom, they have like,
Mhm,
they're always talking about like the dopamine hits, right? Like, so they're
mhm.
basically training you to be good at dieting because you get like rewards and points
Yeah,
for doing good, and then you like you don't get punished necessarily, but then you kind of like, I don't want to say shamed either, but you kind of like get guided to where they want you to go, which
sure.
hopefully the end result is you being a better, eater. But
Mhm,
it's kind of the same thing with the metaverse, right? Like
mhm,
if we can give people this experience that's pleasant and that actually come like helps them complete an objective,
mhm,
you know, there's so many different things out there that that would cause people to come back to the metaverse.
mhm.
I'm thinking specifically actually going back to touring. Like me and my wife used to watch like Netflix, so we'd have to like try and hit the space bar at the same time. Um, so I could be sitting in the back of the bus,
That's
like,
great.
right, like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go, and like you'd hit the space bar, and you're like, oh no, I think I'm like 5 seconds behind you.
Right.
But like, think about like if you could do like a movie theater in the metaverse,
Mhm,
and like so you people could go in, and instead of like actually having to go to the movie theater,
mhm.
you don't even have to be in the same city anymore, right?
And that's such a great point, like, overseas or when, our soldiers are deployed and they wanna have family time, like, what kind of a created, like, moment can you make for them to feel like they are in that same room with their loved ones? Like, there's definitely as we're talking, I can feel it's a scary place to walk into, the metaverse, because you don't want people just to become staring at their screens all day long, and that's something
Right.
that you gotta stay conscious of too, but I think there are still some amazing positive things that can be done, but you do have that responsibility of making sure it is a positive thing for your consumer and it's not done in a selfish, just,
Yeah,
top line
that's
reason.
a great point. How do you like, just out of curiosity, how do you feel that we can, because again, I think part of customer retention is it being healthy, right?
Mhm.
How do you think we can kind of, I don't want to say measure or regulate it, but how do you think we get that trade-off between making sure we're not disconnecting people completely from their actual lives?
Ooh, that's a
It's a
big
tough one,
question.
right?
Yeah. I
Loaded a little bit.
if I had that answer.
Yeah.
Um, it's a conscious effort. I mean, I don't know. I really don't have an answer to that. I think, like for us at Vooks, it would be, encouraging, you know, what did you learn today by Peter Reynolds Planicus? What did you explore? Now go outside and explore, like encouraging that balance of real life and this world.
Yeah.
So maybe that's it. Like, how can you split the difference? Like, you're encouraging them to be in the space, but how can you use that space to encourage them in real life? And that is definitely a responsibility.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that it's everything that we're talking about right now, it's so theoretical. So it's like, at what point, does it become unhealthy? And I think one of the things that we have to stay conscious of with the metaverse right now, if you look at the way that social kind of took over everybody's life,
Mm, mm, mhm.
we have to be careful that we don't kind of, or not kind of, we don't get back into that same pattern, right?
Yeah, I think we let social, take over a little bit too much, so we gotta learn that lesson. I
Yeah.
still fear, um, the effects of some social media content on the youth and not understanding it kinda, I think, set us on a little bit of an unhealthy path, so I hope we don't just
Yeah.
replicate, yeah, there's a responsibility with it for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And we're getting a little bit off like of the customer retention side, but I mean,
Absolutely.
I think a lot of this stuff, I mean, I think a lot of it like plays into the customer retention, right? Because like,
Mhm.
for example, I'm not much of a Facebook user anymore. I actually have uninstalled it from my phone because it's become something that does not provide value to my life.
Right.
It's, you know what I mean? Like, all it is nowadays is, most of my feed on Facebook is, people yelling about the left or the right side of the aisle.
Mhm.
or sharing like, they got a like high score in a game, or sharing memes, but you know what I mean? Like it used to be a place for me to actually go in and connect with friends. And I mean, that's
Mhm.
why I haven't deactivated the account 100%, because I mean, I need to talk to my family on Messenger or something like that. But
Right.
if you think about the value that it used to add versus the value that it's currently adding, now on Facebook, if you think about Facebook as a whole, like, we're the product. They're selling us to
Mhm.
advertisers.
Yes.
And so, I think the metaverse right now is this big shiny thing, like mystery box that nobody has any idea what's going on. And it's going to, it can go one of two ways. Like it could become this really powerful productivity tool that, people choose to use it for good,
Mhm.
or it's going to become this place where, they suck people into it to extract data from them so that
Mhm.
they can try and resell information.
Right.
So, and
Yeah,
I think
and
that's yeah,
it's gonna have
they
that it's have
will.
both of those, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that sucks is that, and I don't even feel like it was necessarily, a lot of these big companies, I don't think they necessarily meant to do harm, but none of us actually really knew I mean, I'm sure somebody did at some point way before the rest of us did, but I don't think when they set out, they intentionally assumed that just data mining, all this information from people was going to turn out to be as harmful as it is.
Right.
But, looking at the metaverse, as far as retaining people in the metaverse, if it doesn't continue to add value, I mean, I have to assume at some point, just like disconnecting from social, it's like, well, this is not something that I need to spend my time on.
Yeah,
I think the metaverse is going to kind of turn into the same thing, don't you?
yeah. I think so too, and I think, like you said, how do you consistently add value for your customer?
Yeah.
Um, and that's the biggest part, and value being maybe you need to have a roadmap a little bit, you can't just throw it out there and hope, like, it's gonna evolve, it's gonna move fast. Knowing the starting point for your company, knowing in the next 20 years where that ending point could look like, and just staying on top of the conversations. And again, as we mentioned in the beginning, it's the Wild West. It is gonna keep shifting. And you can't really predict exactly what's gonna happen, but just staying in step with it is, I think, the most important part right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right. So last couple minutes.
Yeah.
Anything in particular about specifically the metaverse, Web3, future tech that like you're really excited about? I think we were talking about this one. I mean, I know this maybe isn't necessarily the one that we're going to talk about, but you were talking about Babylist. I thought that was a really cool
Yeah.
example of companies that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in the metaverse, but
Mhm.
you as somebody who already works at a company that's digitally disrupting their space, I'd love to hear like what are some of the things that you're excited to see go digital, or that you're excited to see in the metaverse?
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, I mean, for the company, on our end, I think the more we can bridge and hybrid, like I said, the digital natives into the physical book space and making just readers out of the next generation excites me, and ways we can do that and get kids excited about books. I think that's number one. On a personal level, my goodness, that's a great question. I kind of liked your avatar idea, and having, being able to shop without having to go shop. That's great. Um, but I'd love to dive into the cryptocurrency more and understand, because I know that's just on the cutting edge. It's just a matter of time,
Hmm.
and that's going to change the global economy. That's going to
Yeah.
change not just your typical day to day, like, web 1 was, coding, web, and very, very black and white basic. Web 2, you start to introduce the exchange of, for goods. And now the web 3, it's an exchange of goods, but a completely different economy. And in addition to, now web 3 is about the experience, really immersive and community. So what is that going to look like? It's never been done, so I don't even know
Yeah.
what to be
Well,
dreaming about.
yeah, yeah, no, and I mean, yeah, it's definitely hard, and with Web3, and everything becoming decentralized, it's going to be interesting to see how how that all ends up kind of fitting back together, right?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
excited. I'm excited to see concerts go a little bit more digital. I think that'll be exciting. I'm excited to see a little bit more of. I'm excited to see what happens in the creator economy. I know we
Mhm.
didn't dive too much into like creator-driven companies, but there's a lot happening in creator economies right now that I think the metaverse is going to open up a lot of opportunities,
Mhm.
for connecting creators with their consumers. So I think that'll be interesting. And then the other thing is too, I hope they figure out a way to like for NFTs to add value back to the music industry. I think we lost a lot when it went to streaming, and
Absolutely.
I'm hopeful that owning originals again, and original pieces of NFTs and stuff can
Yep.
hopefully add some value back to the
Yeah,
music industry.
smart contracts with blockchain, that's really gonna be a huge impact, and I think that's something a big
Yeah,
puzzle piece that was missing from the music industry that would be helpful, or
yeah,
all really creative industries.
yeah, for sure. But I think we took a big hit on the music industry for sure. Like that was,
Hands down.
yeah, that was one of the worst. I think one of the worst economies hit by everything going digital and MP3s. So
It's still finding its footing
yeah,
15,
yeah, for
10
sure.
years later.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, we are out of time, but I appreciate you being on the show. It was a great conversation to talk about the metaverse and all of the potential things that can happen.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
yeah, absolutely. Before we go, Carlos, do you want to come in and just give us a quick overview of what we got coming up the rest of the week?
Certainly, Eddie. Tomorrow we're going to be speaking down below. You can see the name. It's John Green, co-founder at Nada.co. Not with the name. It's co. It is not a typo. Then on Thursday we don't have a show on Wednesday, but we're going to have on Thursday we'll be speaking to Per Nilsson, the vice president of engineering at Urban Footprint. And finally, on Friday, the conversation will be with Dennis Fox Bonilla at Balta Technologies. So that's what we have this week. So remember, folks, join us right here on Tech Backstage at 11 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, and join us here and be here or be square. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Carlos, and thanks again, Shannon.
Thank you.